What is going on, everyone? Tim from Tearphone Orbital. So today, I'm not going to talk about a lightsaber. I'm going to talk about a blaster. Hopefully this video doesn't get me flagged or taken down on YouTube. This post got my account flagged on Instagram, and it is currently still flagged and under review. I don't understand the algorithm on Instagram. I just don't get it. I watch incredibly awful reels on Instagram daily. I mean, there's some awful stuff on Instagram. I post a replica prop on Instagram and my account gets flagged. So I don't know how long this will stay up. I don't know what YouTube's rules are with fake prop weapons. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. So anyhow, this is an A-180 blaster. This is Erso's blaster from Rogue One. This started off as a I wonder if I could, right? I wonder if I could do a blaster with a removable clip that is also the chassis and power source for the blaster. This started off like last year. I did like a prototype for it. I did the prototype clip, the prototype magazine I did in resin, and it worked. And the project just kind of sat on my workbench for a while. I didn't have time to get to it until a couple of weeks ago, or until a month ago. I finally finished it, right? So I knew that I wanted to do the chassis or the magazine in metal. I wanted the magazine to be heavy enough to actually drop out of the bottom of the blaster, because to me, there's just something so tactile and cool. I mean, it's cool. It looks cool to drop a magazine out of the bottom of a blaster. Look, I'm just going to get this out of the way. We don't see it in any of the films. We don't see anybody taking a magazine out of the bottom of a blaster. It just doesn't happen. I understand that. All right. So all the accuracy guys, please do not attack me. But for me personally, I wanted to see that. I like the feeling of putting a magazine in the bottom of a gun anyway. Right. So I wanted to try to achieve that. Right. So I designed a magazine for a P08 Luger, right? That would fit inside of this blaster. And I had the parts printed in aluminum. I also had to think about a few things, right? So because this chassis was done in aluminum, we had to figure out, or I rather, had to figure out how to isolate the board from the body of the chassis. I had to figure out a power source, right? That was small enough, because obviously I was not going to be fitting an 18350 in here. I wasn't going to be fitting an F14500 or whatever. I wasn't going to be fitting one of our regular, batteries that we frequently see in some of our smaller lightsaber builds. So I chose to go with a small lipo battery in this particular build. So I found one that was small enough footprint to fit in this build. Luckily for me, sound was going to be a very big factor for me. I wanted this blaster to be loud enough. The Nano Elite speaker from Smuggler's Outpost had just a thick enough footprint to fit in this magazine, and I was so happy that worked, because I feel like the Nano Elite speakers from Albert at Smuggler's sound great, and it's just wide enough to fit in this magazine. So I was happy that worked out as well, right? So I do want to come into Fusion and talk a little bit about my design process for this particular chassis, and then we will come up top and talk about how to use it, and then I will talk about a little bit of the install, like what I did, and then that's it. We're not going to put a blade in it because it's a and then a blaster, sorry. I hope the AI algorithm doesn't flag that I said. I said it again. I should bleep all of this out. Anyway, so we'll do a quick demo, and then we will be on our way, right? So let's come into Fusion. Okay. Right. So here it is. The magazine. Magazine splits apart clamshells, kind of. I guess I wouldn't really call this a clamshell because there's not like a hinge, but it splits apart into two parts, an upper and a lower part. So this was very, very, all right, I'm going to like be completely like straightforward and transparent. This was really difficult doing this magazine. This took like 25, 30 test prints to get all of these ridges correct. Okay, because the way that the inside of this replica, so this particular Luger replica is a Red Wolf Airsoft P-08 or Luger replica. It is a very, very accurate replica. In fact, it's very, very well made, nice airsoft gun. Very, very accurate replica. So the inside of this magazine chamber is very, very accurate. So there's a lot of rails that you have to get right on the inside of this, right? So all of these ridges, I had a hard time getting these right. There were a couple of prints that I got close and the magazine would kind of get stuck halfway up, or it wouldn't drop out. Because one of the main things that was important to me was that the magazine drop out by gravity. I wanted it to fall out. As soon as you hit the release mechanism, I wanted it to drop out. I didn't want to have to pull it out. And the only way that would happen is if the clearance was perfect, right, with all of these rails. So I had to make sure that everything was just so. Another thing that was really, really difficult was this notch right here. This darn thing. I cannot tell you how many prints it took to get this right. So this notch is what the release mechanism catches, right? So when you depress the magazine release, it has a latch that this is what releases the magazine, is what I'm trying to say, right? And it also is what clicks the magazine in place. It's what holds the magazine up inside of the body of the gun. Was one of the other main culprits of what took me so long to get this sized right, okay? So just to kind of keep this quote unquote in universe, I did add a Rebel logo on each side of the magazine. And that is it, okay? So obviously with a chassis, one of the things that we have to think about is board access, right? So here is the Profi board. The Profi board, so my first revision of this was to have the board isolated from the body of the chassis with some sort of secondary chassis. I found that this took up a lot of room. So this is actually the final version of this secondary chassis is very, very thin. It's essentially just a box that surrounds all of the terminals of the Profi board and all of that clamshells around the board, and the board sits in place. Now there's a notch at the bottom of the chassis where you can get at your SD card and your USB if you need to. Now, there are not a lot of blaster sound fonts for Profi board, to my surprise. There are a couple of them, maybe a dozen or so. So I can't imagine that you're going to be doing a lot of configuring with this board once it is configured and ready to go. However, for future proofing it, I just like to always have access to the board. So there is access at the bottom of the magazine, just in case you need to, okay? Obviously, I like having access to the kill switch. So there is a notch for a kill switch for the Profi board, okay? Not pictured is the lipo battery. So the lipo battery sits above the Profi board. So the Profi board sits just in this lower section of the magazine. And then the lipo battery kind of sits in here. Very, very small lipo battery. Okay, 3.7 volt lipo. The lipo battery has a JST connector. So whenever, unfortunately, it's not an easy solution. right? Full disclosure, it's not an easy solution to charge the battery, but whenever you want to charge the battery, or whenever you need to charge the battery, there are two Phillips head screws here. You're just going to unscrew those Phillips head screws, unfasten that JST connector, plug it into any JST charger, charge the battery, and then you're good to go. Then plug it back into the Profi board, screw those screws back in, and you're good to go, okay? Here's that 22 millimeter. This is just a placeholder. This is not exactly the 22 Nano Elite, but this is the 22 millimeter speaker, okay? Now, this is the other interesting solution that I had to come up with. How is the chassis going to make a connection to the rest of the blaster, right? I used spring bulgin. I think that's what they're called. I'm probably getting that wrong. Pogo. I'm using pogo pins. There are 7 pogo pins here. 3 for my quote blade, right? 3 for my switches. I added an extra pin for clip in, clip out. I'm not sure if that is completely necessary. I'm still a little bit green when it comes to clip in, clip out. I actually did not fully configure this for clip in, clip out yet, but I added that as an option. I really, really think it would be cool to have a clip in, clip out sound for this. I'm probably going to end up adding that to my config at a later date. This actually shouldn't be in here. Actually, yeah, it can be in here. So yeah, I will be adding clip in, clip out, and that is what that extra pin is for. Okay. And that is it. So this upper piece, this is what lives on in the inside of the blaster, and there are the female end of those pogo pins, and that is what they make a connection to. Okay. And then I wire everything up from there, and we'll talk about that now. Okay, so a lot going on. I had to figure out a lot how I'm going to make everything line up correctly. It was a lot of test printing with this one. Okay, so let's come up top. So here it is. Right off the bat, you're going to notice these holes in the grip. So I chose to put the hole. This is for sound venting, obviously. So I am right-handed. I chose to put them here. Depending on which hand you are, that is where the sound venting will be, right? So before I go any further, I will be offering this as an option on my website, depending on what hand you are. If you're right or left-handed, that will depend on the install, right? So when you place an order, you will need to tell me if you are right or left-handed. That will depend, I will need to edit the chassis, right? So it is a right-handed chassis. If you are left-handed, I will need to flip that speaker placement around, essentially, right? So there are speaker venting holes there. So let's talk about this install, okay? I did mention that there is that upper pogo pin, like PCB holder that is up in here, okay? I bring my wires up through here, up into the barrel. Now, my buddy John from Sabres Forever has pretty much perfected the A-180 blaster install process. Unfortunately, I did this backwards, right? I talked to John after this. John kind of poked fun at me, and it's like he was sarcastic. He's like, you wired your NeoPixels up backwards, which I did, right? So I wired up. So there's a NeoPixel strip on each side here. They're wired up from here down instead of wiring up from here, from the base up, right? So in future builds, what I will likely do is I will likely chop the barrel and 3D print a clear barrel and have it actually, like I'll probably wire up the barrel like an actual blade, kind of like how John does. But for this one, because it was a prototype, I brought my wires into the actual barrel itself, all the way down to the end, and then brought them out and wired up my 2020 neon pixel strip from here down, right? So that is why when you fire, they light from here down. Now I could probably change that in the config and flop it around so they animate from here out, and I'll end up doing that anyway. But yeah, John has done John's done more of these than I can count, right? John, in fact, actually installed my my DL, and the chassis for that one was designed by Chris Skinner. They did an awesome job on my DL. John probably has done more of those than I can count as well, right? So he's the Blasters Forever guy. So shout out to John. So yeah. Anyway, so I brought all my leads to my switches, right? So another thing that I did differently with this one is I've got a brass hat tactile switch behind the actual trigger. I don't have a switch in this area. The switch is actually glued behind the trigger itself. It's peeking just behind here, okay? So I've got some very, very, very small gauge Teflon coated wire that comes behind the switch up into the body of the. And then I've got a switch that is, it's one of those flat Graflex switches. Let me typically see these in Graflex build. I've got one of these flat tactile Graflex type switches. It's not a Graflex switch. I've got one of these switches right in here where this latch makes a connection to the other latch release mechanism. And that serves as my aux switch, okay? One of the things that I will likely change in future builds, I don't quite like the tactile response of this one. You can't really feel the tactile feel of it, right? There's no real response, right? I kind of like feeling the actual, like, a tactile response of a switch, so I might change that in future builds. But this is the aux switch. Okay, and that is it. So, to remove your magazine, so that was one of the things that was the most important part of doing this, was removing the magazine to have it actually drop out of the blaster like that. So this is a full aluminum mag, except for this upper PCB holder, right? So this is where the pins are housed. This is done in FDM. Okay, when I received these aluminum parts, they were bare raw aluminum. I just did aluminum black treatment on them and then sealed that aluminum black. Okay. All right. A number of different fonts on this one. That one, I gotta change that font. That was hard. All right, so let's come out to the bottom. Sit here and play with this thing all day, right? So that tactile feel of like removing the magazine like that, that was the most important thing about this build. I wanted that to be possible. Let's see what other fonts are on.
I don't believe it. That's Clone Force 99.
He doesn't seem to take a hint, this guy.
That's going to get me taken down for sure. Probably one of the most iconic blaster sounds right there.
Mouth blaster.
So this is actually a sound font that John from Sabres Forever made, and I think it is absolutely fantastic. I love this.
This is a rebellion, isn't it?
And there is Jin's. Love that. So having, what I'll likely do to my config is put clip in, clip out. I just have to make sure that it's wired up correctly to switch ground. But I just love the fact that the mag can drop out of the bottom like that. Okay. So that's it. That is my personal A-180 blaster. I have added these to my online shop. I only have 1 or 2 slots. So if anyone is interested, please be aware this is not a ready to ship item. I will need time to order the parts. I have to order the airsoft pistol. I have to order the aluminum parts. So it's not like one and done turnaround kind of deal. I need a couple of weeks for all the parts to come. So if anyone is interested, they are all, it is listed on my shop. So I did get a couple of questions when I did post this. So anyhow, that's all I got. Thank you for watching, everyone. Hopefully this does not get my YouTube account flagged, but if it doesn't, thank you for watching. May the force be with you always. Have a good one, everybody.